by Howard Air. Whether replace or repair, call Howard Air. I'm Patricia Valencia on Arizona's news station, KTAR News.
Strong values and strong opinions. The Mike Broomhead Show. KTAR News, 92.3 FM, and the KTAR News app.
All right, thanks so much for being here. As D.C. rolls along with its session, there's a lot of eyes that are on Washington, D.C. and the confirmation process in the Senate, but they are still working in the House of Representatives on pieces of legislation, and joining us to talk about one of those is Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs. Congressman, welcome back.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be with you.
Let's talk about the Midnight Rules Relief Act. I mentioned it to a couple of people, and they really had no idea what this was about. But when you start talking and reading the details, this is something that should be a bigger news, don't you think?
Yeah, I really do, because it resets our relationship with the bureaucratic state, and it also restores Congress's Article 1 power. But mostly, Mike, what it really does is it allows us to have true oversight of what the bureaucracy is doing. And just to give you a number, this is going to blow your mind. The rules that the Biden agencies put into place that one of my opponents in debate yesterday called the Biden regulatory agenda, they impact the budget $1.34 trillion.
Yeah. Wow.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable. I'm looking at that. There were 1,400 unnecessary, harmful, last-minute rules that were imposed as another statistic. And I think that there's a push in America now. You know, Arizona has done this during the Ducey administration with the reduction in regulation and power taken from the bureaucracy, because these are unelected people, and that people like yourself that have been elected to office, you're held accountable every 2 years for the decisions you make. These bureaucrats aren't held to it. And I'm not saying that as a bureaucrat, not as an insult, just an identifier. They are not held accountable for anything because they don't face the voters.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not a pejorative to call somebody a bureaucrat. We're just talking about what do you do? And, like here's a stack. This is a partial stack, Mike, of the rules. Now, Congress is supposed to fund those. We're supposed to oversee those. But what my bill does, it facilitates that. Whereas right now, the bureaucrats can do massive rule changes, and they do. They impact all kinds of aspects of your life. You know, whether you're going to get to have a gas stove, that was one. Air conditioning. Whether you're going to have a dryer that can actually dry clothes in less than an hour. They wanted it to increase to 2 hours. All of those things become rules. And Congress doesn't know who they are, but the bureaucrats will never be held accountable. But if I go and I introduce a bill on the floor and I say, for instance, guess what? Nobody in Arizona can have a gas-powered stove or oven. Well, the voters would rebel, and they'd say, that's crazy. We got to get rid of Biggs. And I would be held accountable, and justifiably so, but not the bureaucrats.
Yeah, and that's we've heard the horror stories of this, that are rules put in place that they say are supposed to be helpful. There was one with a farmer who bought a piece of land or had a piece of land, and there was standing water after some heavy rain, and the bureaucrats came in and declared it a wetland. And even after the water dried up, wasn't able to use his own land because it had been declared a wetland by someone, and there was no repercussion for the choice.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, think about Waters of the USA. When those were implemented, you got a bunch of dry washes and gullies in Arizona that were deemed wetlands and regulated by those agencies at the federal level. And I mean, you could just go through and name a whole bunch of these things that happen. Like Arizona, we have our own fall standards, for instance, for occupational safety, and our statistics were better than the feds on safety rates. But the feds wanted us to come in and do theirs by rule and tell us that we had to do theirs. These are the types of things that Arizonans may not realize how much the federal bureaucracy is actually regulating your life, when it should be done, first of all, at the state level, but second of all, by people who are accountable to the voter.
So this is where the pushback comes, and I know you've heard it a lot, but can you explain the balance? Because people are going to say that when you go after organizations like OSHA or some of these regulations, that regulations aren't a bad thing and it is supposed to keep people safe. Where does it cross the line from safety and appropriate regulation to overregulation that becomes a hindrance to doing business?
Well, you start seeing the overregulation, the impact of overregulation when businesses get shut down or fined and they can't pay the fine and then they get shut down for sometimes things as minuscule as a paperwork violation. They didn't turn some paperwork on time, or they had a missed date on something. But it also impacts you when you look at how are the prices, say, in housing and everything else that you buy. How does that go up because of federal regulation? So, for instance, on a separate bill that I'm doing that I'm just getting bashed like crazy for. People think that I want to do away with occupational safety and health. That's nothing can be further from the truth. We actually have great occupational safety and health standards in Arizona. They're so good that the feds say, Arizona, you get to regulate yourself. But occasionally the feds want to come in and do something like they say they want to regulate how we regulate heat workers. So if you're a construction worker and it's over 80 degrees, they want us to they want to put regulations in place that basically will shut down our ability to work. Now think about that. In Vermont, they have 9 days a year. This is serious. I'm actually giving you real data. 9 days a year in excess of 80 degrees. In Arizona, it's something like 285 days where the heat index gets above 80. They will give us the same regulatory constraints in Arizona that you have in Vermont. And I'm going to tell you, an outside worker in Arizona and employers here, they have constraints here already through our own occupational health, Department of Labor here. But here's the deal. We know how to deal with heat far better than some bureaucrat who's sitting in a cubicle in Washington, D.C. That's why it needs to go to the states. And this gets back to this other bill, the Midnight Rules reversion. It's the same thing. They're making rules and they're sitting in cubicles in Washington, D.C. When they choose to come into work, they might be teleworking for all we know. But the bottom line is they don't have the experience and knowledge of the unique circumstances of Arizona any more than we have knowledge of the unique circumstances of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Yeah, and to your point, I was a contractor before I was in radio, and I had guys working in the heat and on parking lots, and you're right. We had standards and we had ways that we dealt with things because we know working in it every day, we understand the heat better than anyone else, and nobody wants to keep their employees safer than the employer because they are your lifeblood. Even if it was just a business situation, keeping your employees healthy is the way to keep the work continuing. And the idea that employers don't have any regard for their employees, I think, is a false narrative.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if you've ever written a paycheck for somebody, you understand that you need those people for you to make a living. And you care about them. You develop relationships. I mean, most employers are concerned about their employees' health because they know, especially in a competitive environment like we have today, they know that they're adding value. And if you get shut down because you've got employees that are out or sick, or you develop a reputation as being an unfair, overly harsh employer, you're not going to get the employees that you need to. The profit motive is there, and you got to. If you're shut down, you can't make money. And if your employees are sick and injured because you haven't taken care of them, you don't make money. And that's why we look at this, and you look at the regulations that get put out all the time, and they like I say, they add 1.34 trillion, not billion, but trillion dollars in budget deficit to the federal budget, but also to the economy overall.
Yeah, and we are trying to figure out a way to lower costs, and one of them could be the removal of overregulation. Congressman, it's always good to talk with you about this. I'm anxious to see how it moves forward and how quickly it will in the other chamber, and we'll see if it doesn't get to the president's desk.
Yeah, hopefully it'll get there. It's always good talking to you too, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks. That's Congressman Andy Biggs spending a few moments with us. Coming up in a moment, we are going to shift gears to talk about immigration, but this is a little bit different. They are coming out with some of the people that have been arrested, the arguments and the arguing that is happening about who has been taken into custody. We're going to go into a little bit of that. Is there any validity to the argument about people being arrested that shouldn't be arrested. We'll get to that coming up in just a moment. You know, we're supposed to see some rain, possibly today, most likely tomorrow. We're finally going to see some rain. It's one of the things here in Arizona you don't think about because we don't seem to get it very much. But when we have storms, especially during the monsoon, they are brutal and they are vicious storms that blow in hard. And if you have any weakness in your roof, it's going to be exposed. And I'll ask you an honest question. When was the last time you were on your roof? I have never been on my roof, and I used to be in the construction industry. I've never been on my roof. And so you need to have an inspection. If your roof is over 15 years old, you've got to get it looked at. And I want to recommend my friends at Trevec. Award-winning remodelers, you know their reputation, but it's because of their attention to detail and the high-quality workmanship they provide. They have got a great roofing division, and they would love to work for you, and they would love to make sure your roof is in the best condition possible. If you run an HOA, they will make sure all of your buildings and help you with budgeting, so all of your buildings are protected. Go to Trevec.com. That's Trevek.com. Trevec, together building dreams for over 20 years.
There's a new administration in charge at the White House.
President Trump says he thinks both Russian President Putin and Ukrainian President Zelensky want peace.
I want peace. I just want to see people stop getting killed.
The president said he'll be mostly in touch with Putin by phone, but expects they'll meet in person.
Do we expect that he'll come here and I'll go there and we're going to meet also. We'll meet in Saudi Arabia, see if we can get something done.
We're covering the first 100 days of President Trump's second term on Arizona's news station, KTAR News 92.3, the KTAR News app, and KTAR.com.
Every day, reliable, comfortable, connected. Every day you rely on power. At APS, we work around the clock to deliver some of the most reliable power in the country. But with Arizona's extreme weather, outages can happen. Stay safe and informed with alerts by keeping your contact information up to date. And visit our outage center for updates online or on the APS app. For more ways to stay safe and informed, visit aps.com/brighter.
The Berg Simpson Law Firm, located right here in Phoenix, Arizona, has a national reputation and a proven track record. If you've been injured, don't leave the important choice of legal representation to just anyone. The Berg Simpson Law Firm has proven results, and you can check for yourself at bergsimpson.com. That's BURG Simpson.com. They're your fighters for justice when the game is on the line. Berg Simpson, good lawyers, changing lives. Call 602-777-7000. That's 777-7000. Berg Simpson is responsible for this advertising material.
KTAR News Flash.
At 9:17, I'm Patricia Valencia, and this is what you need to know right now. Inflation back on the rise. Just 3 weeks into President Trump's term, a government report shows inflation climbed to 3% in January, higher than expectations. A new poll finds Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs has a better chance winning next year's governor's race than Karen Taylor Robeson. The K-Strap poll shows Biggs up 1 point over incumbent Katie Hobbs. Meanwhile, Hobbs leads Robeson by 2 points. And Phoenix Sky Harbor is hoping to reduce the amount of firearms